Hi, it's Dayna, and I'm here with your divination for the full moon in Sidereal Taurus. The 2025 Sidereal Astrology Guide says, embodying protection from emotional manipulation. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know to do. So, I've been thinking a lot about this full moon, and I've been thinking a lot about Taurus. And I want to approach talking about this full moon with a little bit of balance because embodying protection from emotional manipulation, it's a lot of heaviness there. It's a lot going on in that theme for this full moon. And I want to ease us into this by talking about Taurus. And I want to start with the productive, constructive aspects of Taurus. The gift of Taurus is self approval. You can think for yourself about how Taurus has manifested in your life by reflecting on, for example, January 2023. That is when Mars stationed direct after a very, very, very long retrograde in Taurus. You can think about spring 2024 through spring 2025. That was when Jupiter was in Taurus. Self approval as a gift of Taurus means you can like yourself and be pleased with yourself, even when other people don't like you and are not pleased with you or your behavior. That's the gift of Taurus. That self approval means you can feel differently about yourself than other people feel about you. That may seem very logical, but I actually earlier today, I go down these random rabbit holes looking at charts and reading people's Wikipedias and looking at news stories, just trying to connect the dots between placements in a person's birth chart and the placements, or rather the experiences that they've had in life. And today I was looking at Oprah Winfrey's birth chart. She is Sagittarius rising and has Jupiter in Taurus. And she was quoted as saying that she wanted people to like her so badly that she was willing to do anything for their approval. She craved people's approval. And she outright said it was because she didn't feel very good about herself. She didn't like herself. And this was like peak Taurus to me, that the value of external approval is high. We're not just talking about someone talking nice to you when we're talking about approval. We're not just talking about someone being sweet or kind to you. We're talking about someone being willing to give you a job because they don't perceive you as a threat and they perceive you as worthy of employment. I'm talking about being able to walk through the store without a salesperson following you around, assuming that you are going to steal. When I'm talking about the gift of self approval for sidereal Taurus, I'm talking about being accepted and being good enough to belong. And that belong could be I want to be accepted and approved of and treated like I belong to the gender group that I identify with. And this is where Taurus comes in. It's all about appearance. That in order to receive external and social approval, in order to receive acceptance, we have to put on the costume and play the part. It reminds me of that guy who was arrested for fraud because he was pretending to be a physician, and his photo is like a meme now because he had on the white coat and he was just scamming folks pretending to be a physician. But that's how it works. Someone in a physician's coat with a clipboard approaches you and asks you questions that you would expect to hear from a doctor, and you think he's a doctor. Obviously, there's harm in that situation, but the important thing to take away from this is that the gift of Taurus is self approval, and it is the capacity to feel differently about yourself than other people feel. It is to radically accept yourself. The ideal of Taurus is to be good enough to belong. To be good enough to belong means that I'm accepted by a group that I want to belong with. Belonging is so powerful that humans will do things to avoid rejection that are irrational, illogical, and often deadly. Let's take masking, for example. When the COVID-19 pandemic began in 2020, we also began a series of eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus, the same signs that are occupied at this month's full moon in Sidereal Taurus. We also had a Venus retrograde in Sidereal Taurus. This brings me to some of the more challenging aspects of Taurus when people have that sign occupied in their birth chart and when we are experiencing transits through Taurus. And that is that, and I think this is something that is maybe unique to Western culture, capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. That our physical survival is often pitted against our desire for acceptance and our need for acceptance. Many people felt like masking ostracized and alienated them. People were willing to expose themselves to COVID over masking. And I always have a lot of empathy for people who made that choice because alienation and rejection and feeling ostracized and left out, it physically hurts. It physically hurts to feel like you don't belong. Rejection physically hurts. And so I hold a lot of empathy for people who took their masks off when Biden said COVID was over, even though it wasn't. Because I understand that when we're talking about approval and belonging, it's not intellectual, it's emotional, it's in our nervous system, it's in our bodies. Such that this is how I often define Taurus. Like when I'm in a reading with clients, I'll say, like, Taurus and Venus really is like, for many people, the irresistible urge to laugh when everybody else is laughing. Taurus is also the irresistible urge to cry when other people around you are sad or crying. It is the way that our nervous systems and bodies are constantly influenced, affected, and mirroring each other. So, if we're talking about masking, it feels dangerous to take your mask off, but it feels more dangerous to be the only one masking. It feels more dangerous to be left out. And this is where embodying protection from emotional manipulation comes in. Manipulation, I realize, is a very charged word, and it makes people feel a certain way and brings up certain scenarios. But let's keep manipulation, but also add another word that may be more accessible for you. Let's say embodying protection from emotional influence. Emotional self abandonment means to deny how you're feeling in order to join in with an emotional experience other people are having or another person is having. I'm going to repeat that because that was kind of heavy. Emotional self abandonment means to deny and leave behind, to not express your natural, spontaneous, emotional thing, your reaction, your feeling, because everybody else feels another way. And it feels too lonely to be in your body and to be in your feelings by yourself. So it's much easier, or maybe it feels safer, to join the other person that you're in relationship with or to join the group that you are in proximity to and express and perform what they're feeling. Emotional self abandonment looks like feeling emotionally hurt or upset, but everyone else is happy and celebrating. And it's too lonely to be in your emotional hurt and upset by yourself. And so you leave that behind, or you feel disrespected. You feel like somebody was talking to you out of pocket. Your body is having a reaction. But instead of staying in your emotions and responding to those feelings in a way that is natural, i.e., discontinuing contact, taking some space, minding your business, licking your wounds, doing some self care, instead of actually being with your feelings and tending to your feelings, you leave those feelings behind and you join your friend, your partner, your parent, the adult, your community in whatever feeling they're having, which is definitely not you feeling respected or disrespected. It's definitely not you feeling hurt. Embodying protection from emotional influence or emotional manipulation is really about being with yourself emotionally and staying with yourself emotionally, even when no one is with you there. It's really, really, really hard. People pleasers, this is your problem. This is the thing. The fear of abandonment that comes with maintaining emotional focus on yourself keeps you from holding on to yourself. One of the things that I notice a lot with folks who have Taurus placements is they feel an incredible sense of responsibility for how the people in proximity to them are feeling. Another great example of this is Will Smith. Will Smith is Taurus rising. He has, I think, Venus and Jupiter in Libra. And he's a comedian. And if you listen to any of his interviews or read his book, memoir, autobiography, whatever it is, very strongly suggest that you listen to the Audible performance of his book because it's more like a one-man show. It's really, really, really good. Anyways, Will Smith will tell you from his own mouth how responsible he has felt historically for how people around him are feeling. Textbook emotional self-abandonment, textbook enmeshment and codependence. Like, I'm not okay till everybody else is okay. And if everybody else is not okay, it's because I haven't made them okay. And so one of the things that Taurus often struggles with in their relationships is letting people have their feelings, letting people be upset, letting people grieve, letting people hurt, letting people be uncomfortable, and not rescuing them and trying to fix them. That can make for a really uncomfortable relationship dynamic for people who have Taurus, because Taurus gets really, really uncomfortable when people aren't okay. Embodying protection from emotional manipulation is really the way that you can short circuit anxiety. If I could give you some homework and I could give you some actionable items to focus on under this full moon, it would be to pay attention to your feelings until it gets uncomfortable. It would be to focus your emotional attention on yourself until you're feeling like it might make other people uncomfortable. In a collective sense, embodying protection from emotional manipulation is to understand that groups form and they cohere or stick to each other. They stick together by having a shared sense of who and what a threat is. Particularly in capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy, groups tend to form around a shared experience of how they're harmed by capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. It's natural for that to happen. When I'm scared of the police and you're scared of the police because you've been harmed or witnessed harm, and I've been harmed or witnessed harm from the police, it's only natural for us to stick to one another because it gives us a sense of sanity. This experience I'm having in my body, this threat detection response, oh, you're having it too? We're more likely to be safe if we bring our nervous systems together and we come together socially in community or relationship, because I know that if I slip up, you know what the threat is. So you know what to look for. Capitalists, the power structure of whiteness, and the power structure of patriarchy do everything in their power to prevent this type of cohesion and coherence around a shared threat. This is why unions do not have the power that they had in the 20th century. Because unions, in their purest form, cohere around a shared threat, which is the capitalist. And in their coherence and formation of a group, they harness the power to resist and protect themselves from the capitalist. And so the capitalists use all of their resources, including money and capital, including media, buying it all up, to prevent you from creating community around the fact that capitalists are a threat to you and your coworkers and other people who work. Protecting yourself from emotional manipulation means to protect yourself from the onslaught of media that tries to convince you that capitalists like Beyonce and Elon Musk and so on and so forth, Jay-Z, that they are your friends, they're not a threat to you. They are buying up media to manipulate you emotionally into not perceiving a threat where there actually is one. Black capitalism was a strategic project of COINTELPRO that defamed the Black Panther Party and the radical Black liberation tradition that arose after the murders of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. After the police brutality became unbearable. Black capitalism is a strategy. It was a strategy of COINTELPRO because now, rather than Black people cohering around shared threats like police, the state, uh, capitalist, once Black people get into another class, Now they're the merchant class. Now they're the entrepreneur class. Now they are the middle class. Now the threat is no longer the state. It's no longer the police because they feel like they can buy themselves to safety. Now the threat is poor Black people. And so middle class and the entrepreneurial class and the whole idea of Black capitalism is not to liberate Black people, but for individuals to feel like they have some power to distance themselves from the real problem, which is poor Black people. Protecting yourself, embodying protection from emotional manipulation is to remove the scales from your eyes that are deceiving you about the true nature of the threats to your survival. The ultimate emotional manipulation of capitalists, of whiteness as a power structure and patriarchy as a power structure, of imperialism as a system and order, is for you not to see death where it actually is coming for you from. So to self-approval is more than just, oh, I like myself, I'm not a people pleaser anymore. People pleasing upholds the state apparatus of violence. It is to say that I recognize where death is coming from. I recognize who the death dealers are. I recognize who wants me dead. And I can look around and find a sense of belonging and community with those who see like I see and who feel like I feel. The challenge with emotional self-abandonment is that it strips you of your power of being an agent of emotional influence. There are hierarchies of capitalist power. There are hierarchies of racial power. There are hierarchies of gender power. But all of these are upheld by hierarchies of emotional power. Who has the power to influence how you feel? Who has the power to influence whether you feel safe or whether you feel in danger? The hierarchy of patriarchy is an emotional hierarchy of dominance that is imposed by fear on men first. To protect yourself by embodying protection from emotional manipulation means that you need to see where the real threat is coming from and to understand how emotional manipulation is the bedrock of every system of dominance that we're all trying to survive. To hold on to yourself emotionally means that when they say boycott from November 25th to December 5th, you boycott because you don't let yourself be talked out of and manipulated out of the rage that you're living paycheck to paycheck. That you just spent a whole year barely being able to afford groceries because they keep raising the price. To embody protection from emotional manipulations, don't let those percentages and those swag bags and all of that other nonsense make you release the rage and the discontent that you've been holding on to because you know it is unjust and you know that the capitalists are violent towards you. I want you to be able to see how emotional manipulation is the primary weapon used to defang you of the very spontaneous emotional uprising in yourself that will lead to sudden change if you cohere in community around it. I've talked about this before, that nominating Kamala Harris for vice president during the 2020 election was the most violent act of emotional manipulation that we had witnessed in decades, that we had experienced in decades. Because it was absolutely effective in defanging the resistance movement that arose around the murder of George Floyd. Don't nobody even say his name anymore. It fell off our lips so quickly and got replaced with Kamala Harris because she was positioned as our savior. This ties into, and I'm going to pull some cards after this, but this ties into what I'm always talking about, that identity is a belief system that is weaponized against you. White Reconstruction by Dylan Rodriguez, Domestic Warfare and the Logics of Genocide. He talks about white multiculturalism and this way that the policy doesn't change. There is no atonement or reparation for harm. There is no restoration of right relation with the land. There is no repentance. Instead, you get a Black person for vice president, or you get a Black person as president of a corporation. And because you're so easy to emotionally manipulate, you will spend your money on a corporation that's otherwise exploiting the resources in your neighborhood and underpaying your community members. You'll support them because they have a Black CEO. You've been emotionally manipulated. Absolutely. When you decide that you're going to support a business, a corporation, or a brand merely because they put somebody up in front of you that has the gender or the race or the hairstyle that you like, you're being emotionally manipulated, and I really need for you to wake up. All right, I'm back with some tarot to offer some insight and guidance on how to navigate this really, really intense full moon. This is not one of those cute ones. And I know y'all gonna get on the internet and this is gonna be some woo-woo girls telling you to manifest this and manifest that. And if they're not manifesting protection from emotional manipulation, then they are sending you on a send-off mission. I'm just being really honest. Um, we are under serious psychological and emotional warfare at this time, where the writing is on the wall. If this was in the biblical times, Nebuchadnezzar would be calling Daniel to interpret his dreams, because I'm most certain that visions of destruction and collapse of the capitalist system and imperial power are haunting folks who have power that they don't want to concede and wealth that they're hoarding and don't want to deal with fairly. The writing is very clearly on the wall that the people have had enough. The writing is on the wall very clearly that this AI bubble is about to burst. The writing is on the wall very clearly that we cannot out capitalism climate disaster. And so when folks are asking me what to do and how to deal and what's the lesson, yo, protect yourself from emotional manipulation. Let's see what these cards have to say about that. We've got the Two of Wands. This card is often an uncomfortable card, and of course, this card on the bottom is giving us our context and reference point for this reading and for this message. But the Two of Wands can be really uncomfortable because it's often highlighting an imbalance in a power dynamic where, for the sake of maintaining the connection, you want to feel like you're equals. And what's really coming to mind for me is the relationship that we have with politicians and celebrities. We are manipulated into these parasocial relationships where we perceive them as an equal. And even more so, where we perceive them to have more power or power over us. But the Two of Wands is actually, no, that's not actually how that works. We have the power. You have the power. So the Two of Wands for me is often this card. It's very much like, girl, get up. Why do you see yourself as the same as someone that you actually have power over? Why are you conceding emotional territory and abandoning yourself emotionally to come into emotional accordance with someone who doesn't even perceive threats the same as you? We've got the Magician And we've got the Nine of Swords. The Magician is a card that speaks to us about our capacity to deal with a medium of some sorts with skill and adeptness. It's to be able to say the thing in the way you need to say it to have the impact that it needs to have. It's being able to handle and use and manage something in a way to get the results that you want. It's an adeptness and an adroitness and adroitness. How do you say that in English? Adroit? I think that's how you say it. Um, that is like to be able to handle and maneuver well. There's something that I wrote in the 2025 guide. Let me see if I can find it that feels very relevant to this. Might have been in October. Feeling the power our emotions have to affect and influence others keeps us from bringing about the fundamental changes we long for. When we lack the material resources, the institutional power, or the guns, tanks, and bombs to enforce our will, we are left with our feelings. Feelings are not the weaker weapon. The evidence of this truth is made apparent in how our emotions are used to make us do things that we otherwise would not do. There is no reason for you to continue to support corporations and capitalists who literally would suck you dry, poison you, leave you dead, and burn your house down. But somehow you keep doing it. Manufactured fear keeps us conforming to systems we know are unjust, immoral, and unethical. But what does it look like to decide how you feel and what you feel for yourself? We are still in this season where water is dominating the sky. Water is the primary tool or element where signs are occupied. And this is requiring of us to build our skill in navigating emotional territory. Many of us have skills and privilege to navigate the material world. We have skills and privilege to navigate the mental world. We're good with words and we know how to read and search the internet, right? We have social skills to navigate the social hierarchies in this society. But very few of us have the skills to navigate emotional terrain, particularly our own emotional terrain, because very few of us have experienced the type of emotional connection and intimacy that would allow us to stay in our bodies long enough to know what we feel. At every turn, choosing ourselves emotionally is pitted against getting our needs met. In every facet of life, it started in childhood. You had to smile and give that relative a hug that you knew was creepy. That's when the emotional abandonment was programmed into you. You were being mistreated by a family member or an adult in your community, and they told you to not make a big deal about it, or they ignored it. That's where the emotional abandonment begins. It began right there. So, of course, you would have more skills navigating other people's emotional terrain and the emotional terrain of the group rather than your own. These cards are saying the power that you are seeking in this moment is in building the skill and capacity to navigate your own emotional terrain. And I'm not talking about no navel gazing, you should feel good all the time, self-care, woo, woo, woo nonsense. I'm talking about actually being able to feel what is a logical survival-based response to capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. What is the logical emotional response to someone making groceries expensive and unaffordable on purpose? What is the logical emotion? Because here's the problem. You've been emotionally manipulated to perceive emotions as wrong and bad and illogical. You've conceded the terrain of your body. and decided to feel about yourself and your body and your emotions the way that other people feel. We've, quote, all decided that emotions are illogical. We've, quote, all decided that to be emotional is weak and inferior. And it is in that state that you are primed for the most violent emotional manipulation. You are primed to see your own logical response to oppression and hardship as illogical. When somebody brings you the truth, you tell them they being too deep. It is that deep. I'm trying not to die. This Nine of Swords is speaking to me about anxiety and how anxiety is treated like an illness. And I just want to offer a reframe. Take your Lexapro real quick. Take your Wellbutrin. I'm not trying to talk you out of taking your medicine, because do what you have to do. However, understand you're taking Lexapro and Wellbutrin so that you can sell your labor, so you cannot feel emotionally alienated by the weight of your grief and depression. You are taking that so you won't be left out, because you know if you stay in that anxiety too long, everyone is going to forget about you and act like you're the problem. They're going to take your job from you. They're going to put you on probation. They're going to say you're too heavy and hard to be around. There will be no care for you when you go into the dark place of confronting your grief and the depression that comes from decades of having your emotional reality disregarded. These are the contradictions that we have to deal with. It's a both and type of situation. I know this sounds crazy, and I would never say this of my own accord because I wouldn't think of it. That's how I know this is divination, because this Nine of Swords is really speaking to me about the power that is inherent to anxiety. Anxiety is your nervous system and your psyche's attempt to bring order to your life by influencing emotionally the people around you. But the problem is that our ways of thinking about being emotionally unwell are solely pathological. They're solely pathologized as an individual shortcoming, rather than being seen as a symptom of a communal and relational ill. This is not to say that you have to believe every thought. This is not to say that you have to believe every feeling. But it is to say that you're suffering from the lack of relational curiosity around your own experience. And because you've suffered from that, you don't know how to be curious about yourself emotionally. Understand that whether it's shopping, whether it's television, whether it's Wellbutrin, whether it's alcohol, weed, sex, gambling, you see how hard they're pushing that right now. All of these things are numbing agents, they're pacifiers. And just like a baby, a pacifier serves a functional purpose. It disarms the baby of their cry, hopefully long enough for the parent to use that time to finish what they're doing and figure out what the real problem is and address it. But the problem is, even with babies, we use pacifiers as a substitute for attention and connection. Even with babies, we use pacifiers as a substitute for emotional curiosity, intimacy, and connection. Because the parents who are giving the pacifier don't even have access to the full range of human emotions. So they surely could not mirror, model, and be present for their child as they are coming into emotional awareness of themselves. Understand the function of the pacifiers in your life as an adult. What are the pacifiers you're using because you don't have access to the full range of human emotions? And as a matter of fact, the prospect of accessing the full range of human emotion brings up shame in you. You ready to abandon yourself already. Oh, I don't do anger. I don't cry. I don't get upset. I don't let things bother you. No, because you're drinking alcohol instead, or shopping, or scrolling, or dissociating, or gaming. Yeah, of course you don't do those things. They're not a badge of honor. It's leaving you primed for emotional manipulation by the nefarious, violent, and oppressive forces of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. And if you really want to understand why revolution begins in the body, you need to realize that your emotions give you the upper hand to influence yourself into community. People think community, the pathway to community, is to leave your emotions and your trauma and your hard experiences behind. It's to act like you ain't been through nothing, or to focus so hard on what you've been through that it becomes an individual way of bonding, rather than looking at the systemic source of your trauma as a shared threat that requires a shared response to overtake and get rid of. There is deep possibility for community building in this moment. Think back to the George Floyd rebellion. The threat was crystal clear. But because we have not gotten to the root, we were disarmed of the very tools and weapons that we had to protect ourselves and bring about change. There was a full moon lunar eclipse in Scorpio as the astrological trigger point of the George Floyd rebellion. That means that the sun was in Taurus and the moon was in Scorpio. Now the sun is in Scorpio and the moon is in Taurus. This is not an eclipse, but it's still having the planets traverse the same terrain that it did back in 2020 when George Floyd was murdered and we took to the streets. Every single time we come through transits that are traveling that same portion of the zodiac, it's triggering the same story, the same possibility. And the possibility in this moment is embodying protection of emotional manipulation. Why are you so easy to be talked out of your feelings? To be given ads out of your that make you abandon yourself emotionally? Somebody sell you something, you gotta have it because you're addicted. We all are. These systems thrive on addiction. They don't function without addiction. Getting sober and rightly discerning the threats to our individual and collective survival require you to be in your body, require you to create emotionally safe spaces where you can tell the truth about what's happening to you and see the pattern of what the shared system and structure is that's causing your harm and oppression. Thank you for tuning in. This has been episode 14 of the Divination for Liberation podcast. I will see you in a couple weeks at the new moon in Sagittarius. When we get to the new moon in Sagittarius, so it's going to be a totally different sky. I want you to watch next weekend, December 5th, 6th, and 7th. Watch the shift. Feel the shift. Watch the news cycle change. Next weekend, December 5th, 6th, and 7th, watch the news cycle change. You'll see it. In the meantime, we are, by God's grace, in the lowest wastewater of COVID this time of year than at any other point during the pandemic. So there is less COVID in the wastewater right now than there was this time in 2020. And I talked about this on a live on Instagram. I'll link it in the description, where I just gave some of my predictions and forecasts for 2020. And I talked about how we are, I think, nearing the quote end of the COVID-19 pandemic, where 2026 is for me the last time we'll likely see a major surge. This is not to say that COVID is gone forever because there are still windows in like 2020 9:30 after that where I can see it coming back in some meaningful way. But what we do have to worry about right now and in 2026 and 2027 is bird flu and a bird flu pandemic. I will not go over all of that again. Again, I'll link the description. Excuse me, I will link the live where I talked about this in the description. Also, at some time in January, I will be doing a 2026 forecast. If you know, you know. If you don't, you will find out. um, Still, wear your mask indoors. It's a practice I'm never going to give up. I don't care what the wastewater says, and I think that's what you should do too. Although I think this is a time where those who need to make doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, and catch up with friends and family, this is a relatively safe time to do it. That being said, I still have my eye on the transition from December to January for some type of surge, though I don't necessarily think it'll be huge. We've made it through November without cases rebounding, which I did not expect. But I do still expect something to be occurring um, between December and January. In the meantime, in between time, y'all take care of yourself, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.